Where do you think you're going dressed like that? Victoria froze halfway down the staircase, her hand gripping the marble banister. She could feel Dominic's eyes burning into her back the first time he'd really looked at her in 21 days. 21 days of silence. 21 days of sleeping in separate rooms. 21 days of her Mafia boss husband treating her like a ghost in their own Chicago penthouse. But tonight, in this blood-red dress that left nothing to the imagination, Victoria Castellano was done being invisible. If you want to see how this ends, you better subscribe right now because what happens next will leave you speechless. Her college reunion was in an hour. The dress was perfect. Her makeup was flawless. And Dominic, he looked absolutely furious. But here's the twist. This dress was never about the reunion. It was a weapon, a last desperate move to shatter the walls between them before their marriage crumbled completely, and it was about to detonate. To understand what was about to explode in that penthouse, you need to know who Dominic Russo really was. On paper, he was a legitimate businessman, CEO of Russo Logistics, one of the largest shipping and freight companies in the Midwest. Warehouses in Detroit, distribution centers in Milwaukee, corporate offices overlooking Lake Michigan in downtown Chicago. The kind of operation that moved millions of dollars in goods every single day. But paper lies. The truth? Dominic Russo was the head of one of Chicago's most powerful crime families. Third generation. His grandfather had built the empire during Prohibition, his father had expanded it into labor unions and construction, and Dominic? He'd modernized it. Legitimate businesses as fronts, underground operations that controlled everything from the ports to protection rackets across Illinois, Indiana, and parts of Michigan. He was dangerous, powerful, the kind of man who could end careers or lives with a single phone call. And 6 years ago, Victoria Castellano had married him, knowing exactly what that meant. Before we dive deeper, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. Their wedding had been the event of the season. St. James Cathedral packed with Chicago's elite politicians, judges, business moguls, and an equal number of men in expensive suits with blood on their hands. Victoria had walked down that aisle in a dress that cost more than most people's cars, and when Dominic lifted her veil, the look in his eyes had promised her the world. For 5.5 years, he'd delivered. Passion that burned hot enough to melt steel. Late nights tangled in silk sheets, whispered confessions in the dark, stolen weekends in their lake house where the rest of the world didn't exist. He'd been attentive, devoted, obsessed with her in the best possible way. Victoria had never doubted for a second that she was the center of Dominic Russo's universe, until she wasn't. The shift had been gradual at first. Longer hours at the office, more encrypted phone calls behind closed doors, conversations that used to flow easily, suddenly hitting walls. When she'd ask about his day, he'd deflect. When she'd suggest a weekend away, he'd cite urgent business. The man who used to tell her everything started treating her like she was on a need-to-know basis, and she didn't need to know. Victoria had tried everything. Romantic dinners that he'd show up late to, already distracted. Surprise visits to his office that his assistant would intercept with apologetic smiles. Direct conversations about the distance growing between them that Dominic would acknowledge with a nod and a promise to do better, a promise that never materialized into actual change. She'd felt herself drowning slowly, watching the man she loved slip further and further away while she stood on the shore, screaming into the void. Then came the phone call with Jew. 3 weeks ago, Victoria had been in the penthouse library, wineglass in hand, pouring her heart out to her best friend. "I feel trapped, Jew, like I'm suffocating. This marriage, I don't know how much longer I can keep living like this, like I'm on the outside of his life, just watching through a window." She hadn't known Dominic was home early, hadn't heard him in the hallway outside the library door, hadn't realized he'd overheard just enough to destroy everything. The next morning, his things were in the guest suite. No explanation, no fight, no conversation, just the quiet, devastating click of a door closing between them. 21 days. That's how long it had been since Dominic had slept in their bed, since he'd touched her beyond the occasional accidental brush of hands, since he'd looked at her with anything other than careful, distant politeness, the kind you'd show a stranger in an elevator. Victoria had counted every single one of those days. Breakfast in the kitchen while she was still asleep, late nights at the office that stretched past midnight, messages delivered through his assistant, Marcus. "Mr. Russo will be working late again tonight. Mr. Russo has a business dinner in the city. Mr. Russo asked me to let you know he won't be home until after 11. Mr. Russo. Like she was just another employee on his payroll. The penthouse had become a mausoleum of unspoken words, 10,000 square feet of marble and glass and designer furniture, and Victoria had never felt more claustrophobic in her life. Each room echoed with conversations they weren't having. Every corner held memories of what they used to be, and reminders of what they'd become. She wasn't just hurt anymore, she was drowning, and tonight was supposed to be her life raft. The college reunion had been circled on the calendar for months. Back when things were still good between them, Dominic had even offered to come with her, charm her old classmates, play the devoted husband. Now it represented something else entirely. One last desperate attempt to feel seen, to feel wanted, to remember what it was like to exist in a room and have someone actually notice. The red dress had been a calculated choice, a weapon, a final play. If Dominic Russo wouldn't see her, maybe someone else would. The Louboutin heels clicked against marble with each step down the grand staircase. Sharp, deliberate, the sound of a woman who'd made up her mind. Victoria's hand trailed along the banister, her fingers steady even though her heart was trying to hammer its way out of her chest. The red dress moved like liquid fire with each step, silk so fine it whispered against her skin, cut so perfectly it might as well have been painted on. Strapless, backless, a neckline that plunged dangerously low and a slit that climbed all the way to mid-thigh. She'd spent 2 hours getting ready, hair swept up to show off her neck and shoulders, smoky eyes that made her look mysterious and dangerous. Lips painted the exact same shade as the dress, crimson, bold, impossible to ignore. Diamond earrings caught the light from the chandelier overhead, throwing prismatic patterns across the foyer. The same earrings Dominic had given her on their first anniversary, back when he still remembered she existed. Victoria was halfway down the staircase when she felt it, the weight of his gaze, heavy as a physical touch, burning into her skin like a brand. She didn't look up, didn't give him the satisfaction, just kept moving, kept breathing, kept pretending her entire body wasn't suddenly, violently aware of his presence. "Where do you think you're going dressed like that?" His voice cut through the silence like a blade, low, dangerous, edged with something she hadn't heard in 3 weeks, something raw and barely controlled. Victoria paused, one Louboutin hovering above the final step. Slowly, so slowly, she raised her eyes. Dominic stood in the doorway of his study like he owned the world, which, in many ways, he did. 6'2" of lean muscle and controlled power, shoulders filling the frame, arms crossed over his chest. He'd loosened his tie at some point, the top 2 buttons of his white dress shirt undone, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars that told stories he'd never fully shared. Dark hair slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. Sharp jawline tight with tension. And those eyes, God, those eyes dark as midnight and burning with fury she could feel from 15 feet away. He looked furious. "Good. Out." Victoria stepped down onto the marble, meeting his stare without flinching. Her voice was steady, cool, completely at odds with the chaos inside her. "My college reunion, remember? It's been on the calendar for 3 months. Like hell you are." Dominic moved then, and Victoria's breath caught despite herself. He'd always moved like a predator, smooth, controlled, economical every step, purposeful, every movement calculated. It was one of the first things that had drawn her to him 6 years ago, back when he was just another ambitious law student with dangerous connections and eyes that promised sin. Before the empire, before the power, before everything got so damn complicated. He crossed the distance between them in seconds, stopping just 2 feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne, cedar and smoke, and something uniquely him that made her head spin. Close enough to touch, but the air between them crackled with 3 weeks of unspoken rage. "You're not walking out of this house dressed like that," Dominic said, each word carefully controlled. Measured, like he was holding himself back from something explosive. "Not to see a bunch of men who'll spend the entire night undressing you with their eyes." Victoria laughed. The sound was sharp enough to cut glass. "Now you care what I wear?" She took a step closer, invading his space the way he'd invaded hers. "Now you notice I exist." A muscle jumped in his jaw. "Don't test me tonight, Amara." "Or what?" She cut him off, her voice rising. "You'll give me the silent treatment? Oh wait, you've been doing that for 3 weeks already. Tell me, Dominic, how exactly will I know the difference?" His eyes swept down her body, slowly, deliberately, lingering on the plunging neckline, the curve of her waist, the dangerous slit that showed too much thigh. When his gaze returned to her face, something feral burned there, something that made her knees weak, even as fury kept her spine straight. "Who are you dressing up for?" His voice had dropped an octave, gone rough around the edges. "Maybe someone who will actually look at me." The words came out before she could stop them, sharp and vicious and designed to wound. "Someone who will touch me, someone who won't act like I'm a ghost in my own damn house." The words hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Dominic's hands flexed at his sides. Victoria watched the war play out across his face, fury and hurt and possessive rage all tangled together into something explosive, something dangerous. "You don't mean that," he said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "Don't I?" Victoria grabbed her clutch from the foyer table, her movements sharp with frustration. "You haven't said more than 10 words to me in weeks. You won't eat with me, won't sleep in the same room, won't even look at me unless you absolutely have to." She turned toward the door, her hand reaching for the handle. "So forgive me if I'm a little curious about what it might feel like to be wanted again." Her fingers closed around the cold brass. And that's when Dominic Russo finally snapped. Dominic moved faster than thought. 1 second, Victoria was reaching for the door. The next, she was pinned against the marble column beside the entrance, his body pressed against hers, his hands bracketing her face, caging her in. The clutch clattered to the floor. "Forgotten. Don't." His voice was ragged now, all that careful control shredding at the edges, unraveling right in front of her. His chest heaved against hers, his breath hot against her lips. They were so close she could count his eyelashes, see the flecks of gold in those dark eyes, feel the tremor running through his hands. "Don't what?" Victoria whispered. Her back pressed against cool marble, every nerve ending suddenly, violently alive after weeks of numbness. "Don't leave." The words came out broken, raw. "Don't walk out that door. Don't." He stopped, throat working as he swallowed hard. His thumb traced her cheekbone with aching gentleness that contradicted the fury radiating from every inch of him. "Don't make me watch you go." Victoria's chest tightened. This wasn't the cold, distant man who'd been avoiding her for 3 weeks. This was something else entirely, something desperate and terrified and barely holding together. "Dominic." "I heard you, Victoria." His jaw clenched. 3 weeks ago, on the phone with Jew." Her heart stopped. "I came home early," he continued, each word seeming dragged from somewhere deep. "You were in the library. I was going to surprise you, maybe actually talk to you for once instead of being a coward. And then I heard you say it." His eyes closed briefly, like the memory physically hurt. "You said you felt trapped, that this marriage was suffocating you, that you didn't know how much longer you could." He stopped, his voice cracking. "You didn't finish the sentence. You didn't have to." Understanding crashed over Victoria like ice water. "You heard that?" The words came out barely above a whisper. "That's why you've been—" "I heard my wife tell her best friend she wanted out." Dominic's hands slid down to her shoulders, fingers tightening like he was afraid she'd disappear. "I heard the woman I love more than my own life say she was suffocating in our marriage. If you're hooked on this story, hit that like button. It helps us bring you more content like this." "So yeah," he continued, his voice hollow now. "I moved into the guest suite. I gave you space. I stayed away because I thought—" He laughed bitterly. "I thought maybe if I wasn't around so much, you could breathe again. Maybe you'd feel less trapped." Victoria stared at him, horror dawning across her face. "I've been going insane for 3 weeks, Dominic said, trying to figure out what I did wrong, trying to prepare myself for the day you actually pack your bags and leave, trying to memorize every detail of you because I knew I was losing you and there wasn't a damn thing I could do to stop it." His forehead dropped to hers, and Victoria felt wetness on her cheeks. She didn't know if the tears were hers or his. "Every morning I woke up terrified it would be the day you asked for a divorce," he whispered. "Every night I lay awake in that guest room, knowing you were just down the hall but might as well have been on another planet. And tonight," his voice broke completely, "tonight I see you in this dress, looking so beautiful it hurts to breathe, about to walk into a room full of men who'd kill for a chance with you. And I realized I can't do it. I can't let you go. I can't watch you walk out that door, even if staying is killing you." "Dominic," Victoria's hands came up to cup his face, forcing him to look at her. "You didn't hear the rest of the conversation." He went very still. "What?" "You didn't hear the rest." Tears spilled over, hot and fast. "God, Dominic, You didn't hear what I said after that." His eyes searched hers, desperate and confused and terrified of hope. "I wasn't talking about leaving you," Victoria said, her voice shaking. "I was talking about feeling trapped outside your life, outside your walls. You'd been shutting me out for months, working later, sharing less, building this distance between us. I felt suffocating because I couldn't get through to you anymore." Dominic's expression shifted. Confusion, disbelief, the first fragile edge of understanding. "I told you I felt trapped on the wrong side of the walls you built," Victoria continued, the words tumbling out now. "That I was dying for you to let me back in. That I didn't know how much longer I could keep trying to reach you when you kept pushing me away." "What?" The word came out strangled. "I wasn't talking about leaving our marriage, you idiot." She laughed through her tears. "I was talking about feeling like I'd already lost you, like you'd decided I didn't deserve to be part of your world anymore." Dominic's eyes closed. When they opened again, they were glassy with unshed tears. "I thought," his voice broke, "I thought you wanted out. I thought I was the problem. That being married to me, to this life, to everything I am, I thought it was destroying you. The only thing destroying me was your silence," Victoria whispered. "Your distance. Waking up every day next to a man who wouldn't let me in anymore. That's what was suffocating me." Jesus Christ. Dominic's hands were shaking now, framing her face like she was something precious and fragile. "Victoria, you absolute fool," she said softly. "Did you really think I'd want to leave you? I heard you say you were trapped." His thumb caught a tear sliding down her cheek. "What else was I supposed to think? You were supposed to ask me." Her voice cracked. "You were supposed to talk to me instead of just disappearing, instead of deciding on your own what I needed." "I thought I was losing you," he whispered. "These 3 weeks have been hell." "You were losing me," Victoria admitted. "Just not the way you thought." Dominic's forehead pressed against hers, both of them breathing hard. 3 weeks of misery and miscommunication finally cracking open between them. "Tell me," he said hoarsely. "Tell me what you meant. All of it." Victoria took a shaky breath. "You started shutting me out months ago. Little things at first, deflecting when I asked about your day, cancelling plans we'd made, spending more time at the office. Then bigger things. You stopped telling me about your business, stopped including me in decisions, started treating conversations like classified briefings where I didn't have clearance." Her hands slid down to his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath the crisp fabric of his shirt. "Every time I tried to get close, you'd put up another wall. Every time I asked what was wrong, you'd say, 'Nothing,' or 'just work stress,' or 'don't worry about it.' You started treating me like an obligation instead of your wife. Like I was something fragile you had to protect rather than your partner." "Victoria, I felt trapped outside your life, Dominic." The tears came harder now. "Trapped watching you pull away and not knowing why. Trapped in this marriage where I was supposed to be your equal, but you were treating me like a child who couldn't handle the truth. That's what I told you. That I didn't know how much longer I could keep living like that on the outside, always reaching for you and never quite touching you." Dominic's eyes closed, pain etched across every line of his face. "I thought I was protecting you," he said finally. "From what I do, from the reality of my world, from—" He stopped, jaw clenching. "Things have been escalating with the Bususan families. The Kims, specifically. They've been pushing into our territory, trying to take control of the port operations we've maintained for over a decade." Victoria went still, listening. "It's been bad," Dominic continued, his voice low. "Really bad. 2 of my men ended up in the hospital last month. There have been threats, violence, close calls that kept me up at night. And all I could think about was keeping you safe, keeping you away from it, keeping you from being touched by any of it." His hand slid down to her shoulders, gripping tight. "I didn't want you to see that side of things. Didn't want you to look at me and see a monster. Didn't want you burdened with the weight of what I have to do to keep this empire running. So I started pulling back, keeping things from you, building walls between us and the ugliness of my world." "You were trying to protect me," Victoria said slowly, understanding dawning. "I thought if you didn't know the details, you'd be safer, happier." He laughed bitterly. "Turns out I was just being a coward who pushed away the one person I needed most." "Dominic," Victoria's voice was firm now, cutting through his self-recrimination. "I married you 6 years ago knowing exactly who you are, knowing what you do, knowing the world you operate in." She pressed her palms flat against his chest. You think I don't see the blood on your cuffs when you come home late, that I don't notice when you take calls at 3 in the morning and come back to bed tense, that I don't hear the coded conversations, see the guards you've added to our security detail, feel the weight you carry every single day. His eyes widened slightly. I'm not naive, Victoria continued. I've never been naive about what being your wife means. The danger, the violence, the moral grey areas, I knew all of it when I said I do. What I didn't sign up for was being shut out, being treated like I'm too fragile to handle the truth, being protected from you instead of protected by you. I thought, Dominic's voice cracked, I thought if you knew everything you'd leave, that you'd realize what kind of man you'd married and decide it was too much. So instead you made that decision for me. There was no accusation in her voice, just sad understanding. You decided I couldn't handle it. You decided to carry everything alone. You decided our marriage would work better with walls between us. I was wrong. The admission came out raw. God, Victoria, I was so wrong. I thought distance would keep you safe, but all it did was push you away. I thought silence would protect you, but it just made you feel invisible. We've been destroying our marriage, trying to save it. Victoria said softly, you pulling away to protect me feeling abandoned and not understanding why. Both of us suffering alone when we should have been facing it together. Dominic's hands came up to frame her face again, his touch achingly gentle. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so damn sorry, for shutting you out, for making you feel trapped, for 3 weeks of hell that I put us both through because I was too much of a coward to just ask you what you meant. I'm sorry too. Victoria's fingers threaded through his hair, for not being more direct, for venting to Jew instead of confronting you, for letting you overhear something out of context that made you think I wanted to leave. Did you? The question was barely audible. Want to leave? Never. The word came out fierce. Not once. Not even during the worst of these 3 weeks. I was angry, hurt, drowning, but I never wanted out of our marriage. Dominic, I just wanted you back. Something in his expression crumbled. Relief and anguish and desperate love all tangled together. I don't deserve you, he said hoarsely. Probably not. A watery smile crossed her face. But you're stuck with me anyway. Promise? The vulnerability in his voice nearly broke her. I promise. She pulled him closer, their lips barely an inch apart. No more secrets, no more walls, no more sleeping in separate rooms and pretending we're okay when we're falling apart. From now on, we face everything together. The danger, the violence, the Buzusan families, all of it. You don't get to protect me from your world anymore, Dominic. I'm part of it. I chose it. I chose you. Everything? He whispered. Everything, she confirmed. Your burdens are mine. Your battles are mine. Your empire is mine. Because that's what marriage means, carrying the weight together, not you shouldering it alone while I stand on the sidelines. Dominic's eyes searched hers for a long moment. Then, finally, he nodded. Together, he said. The word a vow. Together, Victoria echoed. And when he kissed her, it tasted like forgiveness and promise, and 3 weeks of desperate longing finally finding release. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. His chest heaved, his hands still framing her face, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. The reunion, Victoria whispered, though the words felt meaningless now. Distant, like they belonged to a different lifetime. Forget the reunion. Dominic's voice was rough, raw with emotion. His thumb traced her lower lip, his eyes dark with something that made her knees weak. You're not going anywhere tonight. Possessive much? But there was no heat in her words, just relief, just love. When it comes to you. His gaze dropped to the red dress, tracking every dangerous curve. Always. Especially when you're wearing a dress designed to start wars. Victoria laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. It worked, didn't it? Got you talking to me again. Dangerous game you were playing. His hand slid down to her waist, pulling her closer. What if I'd actually let you walk out that door? Then I would have spent the entire night miserable. She traced the line of his jaw, feeling the tension there. Checking my phone every 5 minutes, hoping you'd call. Probably would have left early and come home to find you locked in your study, still avoiding me. Dominic's expression shifted. This dress, he said slowly, realization dawning. You weren't really wearing it for them, were you? No. Victoria met his eyes, letting him see the truth there. I was wearing it for you. What time is it where you're watching? Let us know in the comments. For me, he repeated, like he was testing the words. One last desperate attempt to make you see me again. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. To break through whatever walls you'd built, to remind you that I exist, that we exist. She pressed her palm flat against his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her hand. I've been invisible for 3 weeks, Dominic, walking through this penthouse like a ghost, eating meals alone, sleeping in a bed that felt too big without you, watching you avoid me like I was something toxic, something dangerous, something you couldn't stand to be near. Her voice cracked. Tonight was supposed to be my last play. If this dress, if looking like this, if putting myself out there, if none of it made you react, made you see me, then I was going to accept that maybe we really were over, that maybe whatever we had was dead, and I just hadn't accepted it yet. Dominic's hands tightened on her waist. Victoria, I wasn't trying to make you jealous, she continued. I wasn't trying to hurt you or punish you. I was just God. I was drowning. And this felt like the only life raft I had left. One last chance to make you look at me the way you used to. Like I mattered. Like I was worth fighting for. You've always been worth fighting for. His voice was fierce now. Every single day. Every single second. Then why did it feel like you'd given up on us? The tears came again, hot and fast. Why did it feel like you'd already decided our marriage was over and just hadn't told me yet? Because I'm an idiot. Dominic pulled her flush against him, eliminating any space between them. A coward who thought he was being noble, who convinced himself that pushing you away was the same as protecting you. His hand slid up her back, fingers tracing the bare skin exposed by the dress. You wore this for me, he said, wonder creeping into his voice. You got dressed up, looked absolutely devastating, and came downstairs hoping I'd finally see you. Hoping you'd finally fight for us, Victoria corrected. Hoping you'd care enough to stop me, to ask me to stay, to give me any sign that our marriage still meant something to you. It means everything to me. The words came out broken. You mean everything to me. I've been going insane for 3 weeks, Victoria. Lying awake in that guest room, knowing you were just down the hall, wanting to go to you, to hold you, to fix whatever I'd broken between us. But I was so convinced you wanted space, wanted distance, wanted out. I wanted you, she interrupted. Just you. Not the distance, not the silence, not the careful politeness. I wanted my husband back. Dominic made a sound low in his throat, half growl, half surrender. You have me, he said roughly. You've always had me. Every piece, every broken part, every dark corner I tried to hide from you. It's all yours, Victoria. It's always been yours. Then his mouth crashed against hers. 3 weeks of desperate longing poured into one searing kiss. 3 weeks of hurt and loneliness and love that had nowhere to go, finally finding release. Victoria gasped against his lips, her body igniting like he'd struck a match to gasoline. This was what she'd been craving. Not the polite distance, not the careful avoidance. This raw, consuming need that had always burned between them. The kind of passion that made the rest of the world disappear. The kind of connection that reminded her why she'd married this dangerous, complicated, infuriating man in the first place. His hands were everywhere, tangling in her hair, sliding down her spine, gripping her waist like he was afraid she'd evaporate. She kissed him back with equal ferocity, pouring 3 weeks of starvation into every movement. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic's eyes were nearly black with want. That dress, he murmured against her lips, is the most dangerous weapon you've ever used against me. Victoria smiled. Good thing I'm on your side then. Good thing, he agreed. Then, in one fluid motion, he swept her up into his arms. Victoria yelped, then laughed, wrapping her arms around Dominic's neck as he cradled her against his chest like she weighed nothing. What are you doing? Making up for 3 weeks of stupidity? He headed for the grand staircase, taking the steps 2 at a time with effortless strength. Fair warning, this might take a while. I've got all night. She pressed her lips to his throat, feeling his pulse jump beneath her mouth. And tomorrow? And the day after that? Good. His voice dropped an octave. Because I plan to spend significant time worshipping every inch of this dress, and then even more time getting you out of it. Heat pooled low in her stomach. I like this plan. You'll love the execution. He shouldered through the door to their bedroom. Their actual bedroom, not the guest suite he'd been exiling himself to. The space felt almost foreign after weeks of sleeping alone, but familiar in all the ways that mattered. Their books stacked on the nightstand, her perfume bottles arranged on the dresser, his watch collection in the corner, the framed photo from their honeymoon in Santorini, evidence of a shared life she'd been terrified of losing. Dominic set her down gently beside the bed, his hands immediately finding her waist again, like he couldn't bear to stop touching her. "I meant what I said earlier," he murmured. "You were never invisible to me. Then why did it feel that way?" "Because I'm an idiot who thought distance would keep you safe." He traced the strap of her dress with one finger, his touch feather-light. "Every time I looked at you, I wanted to tell you everything. Every dangerous deal, every threat, every nightmare keeping me up at night. But I convinced myself that knowing less would protect you more." Victoria covered his hand with hers. "Protect me from what? Being your partner?" "Protect you from the ugliness." His jaw tightened. "The Bususan situation, it's been worse than I let on. The Kim family isn't just pushing into our territory. They're trying to take over completely. The port operations, the shipping routes, the distribution networks, everything my grandfather and father built." He turned his hand over, lacing their fingers together. "Last month, they ambushed 2 of my men outside a warehouse in Gary, Indiana. Put them both in the hospital, one with a collapsed lung, the other with a fractured skull. It was a message, a warning that they're not playing games anymore." Victoria's breath caught, but she didn't pull away, just squeezed his hand tighter. "There have been other incidents," Dominic continued, his voice low. "Threats against our legitimate businesses, bribes offered to our people to switch sides. Anonymous calls in the middle of the night warning me to back off or face consequences. It's been escalating for months, and every day I wake up wondering if today's the day they decide to hit closer to home." "Closer to me," Victoria said quietly. "Yes." The word came out like a confession. "I've been terrified they'd use you to get to me, that they'd see you as my weakness and exploit it. So I pulled back, tripled our security, started carrying a gun even inside the house, and convinced myself that if I kept you at arm's length, if they saw distance between us, you'd be less of a target." "Idiotic logic," Victoria said, but her voice was gentle, extremely idiotic. A bitter laugh escaped him. "If anything, you being isolated and alone would have made you more vulnerable. But I wasn't thinking clearly, just reacting out of fear." Victoria reached up, cupping his face in her hands. "I knew, Dominic." His eyes widened. "What?" "I knew something was wrong. I knew there was danger." She traced his cheekbone with her thumb. "You think I don't notice when you come home with blood on your cuffs, even after you've tried to wash it out? When you take calls at 3 in the morning and pace the hallway for an hour afterward? When you add more guards to our detail and start checking the security feeds obsessively?" Dominic stared at her, stunned. "I see everything about you," Victoria continued softly. "The tension in your shoulders when you think I'm not looking. The way you check your phone constantly, like you're waiting for bad news. The nights you don't sleep at all because you're too busy running scenarios in your head. You never said anything, because you clearly didn't want to talk about it." She smiled sadly. "I kept waiting for you to trust me enough to open up, to let me in, to treat me like your partner instead of something fragile that needed to be protected. Instead, you just pulled further away." "I trust you with my life," Dominic said hoarsely. "I just didn't want to burden you with the weight of it all. Marriage means carrying that weight together." Victoria's voice was firm now. "Your burdens are mine. Your dangers are mine. Your world is mine because I chose it. I chose you, knowing exactly what came with it." She pulled him closer, their foreheads touching. "No more secrets," she said. "No more distance. No more sleeping in separate rooms and pretending we're okay when we're falling apart. From now on, we face everything together. The Bususan families, the threats, the violence, all of it. You don't get to protect me from reality anymore." "No more secrets," Dominic agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "No more walls. No more carrying everything alone. Promise me." "I promise." He kissed her softly. "From now on, we're a team, partners in everything. No more decisions made in isolation. No more trying to shield you from the truth. We face it all together." "Together," Victoria echoed. His hands slid up her back, finding the zipper of her dress. "Still want to keep this on?" "I think it served its purpose." She smiled against his lips. "Got you back, didn't it?" "You never lost me," the zipper whispered down her spine, cool air hitting her skin. "I was just too much of a coward to show you I was still here." "Then show me now," Victoria whispered. "Show me we're still us. That 3 weeks of hell didn't break what we have. Nothing could break us. Dominic's voice was fierce. Not the Busuzans, not my stupidity, not anything. You're mine, Victoria Russo. And I'm yours. Forever. Forever, she agreed, and as the red dress pooled at her feet, they finally came home to each other. Hours later, Victoria lay tangled in silk sheets that smelled like them, sweat and perfume, and the aftermath of desperation finally satisfied. Dominic's arm was draped across her waist, his chest pressed against her back, his breathing steady and warm against her neck. The Chicago skyline glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, city lights casting soft shadows across their bedroom. Everything felt different now, lighter, like they'd finally broken through to the other side of something that had been suffocating them both. You awake? Dominic's voice was rough with exhaustion. Victoria laced her fingers through his, pulling his arm tighter around her. Barely. You wore me out. Good. He pressed a kiss to her shoulder. I have 3 weeks to make up for. That was just the beginning. She laughed softly, snuggling deeper into his embrace. I'm holding you to that. They lay in comfortable silence for a moment, just breathing together, existing in the same space without walls or distance or fear. Tell me about the Busuzans, Victoria said quietly. Please. I want to know what's been keeping you up at night. Dominic tensed slightly behind her, but didn't pull away. Progress. The Kim family has been making aggressive moves into our shipping operations, he said finally. They want control of the port routes we've maintained for over a decade, routes that handle everything from legitimate cargo to less legitimate merchandise. How bad is it? Bad enough that I've had to triple security on all our warehouses. Bad enough that I've been carrying a gun even inside the house. He paused. Bad enough that I was terrified they might use you to get to me. Victoria turned in his arms to face him. Is that why you pushed me away? Partly. His hand cupped her cheek. I thought if they saw distance between us, you'd be less of a target. If it looked like our marriage was falling apart, maybe they'd think you weren't worth the risk. Extremely idiotic, Victoria said, but kissed his palm. If anything, me being isolated would have made me more vulnerable. I realize that now. He looked pained. I wasn't thinking clearly, just reacting out of fear. So, what's the plan? Victoria propped herself up on one elbow, meeting his eyes. How do we handle the Kims? Dominic's eyebrows rose. We? Yes, we. She poked his chest. You just promised we're a team, partners in everything. So what's our strategy? He studied her face, something like wonder crossing his features. You really want to be involved in this? I really want my husband to stop treating me like I'm made of glass. She traced the scar on his shoulder, a knife wound from years ago. I can handle knowing about the dangers. What I can't handle is being kept in the dark while you shoulder everything alone. Dominic was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. There's a meeting scheduled in 3 days. Neutral territory, a restaurant in the Loop that's been used for negotiations like this before. Mediators present from the other families. If we can come to terms on territory division, the violence stops. And if you can't, his jaw tightened, then things escalate. Which is why I've been so stressed. Every decision I make affects not just me, but you, our people, our future. Then let me help you make those decisions. Victoria threaded her fingers through his hair. 2 heads are better than 1, and I'm smarter than you give me credit for. I know exactly how smart you are. He pulled her back down against him. That's not the issue. The issue is me being a controlling idiot who thought isolation equaled protection. Reformed idiot, she teased. Working on it. He kissed her temple. I promise to include you from now on. In everything. The good, the bad, the dangerous. That's all I ask. She traced patterns on his chest. Well, that and for you to never sleep in the guest room again. Never again, he agreed fervently. I'd rather sleep on the floor in here than spend another night in that room without you. Drama queen. You're drama queen. He rolled them so he was hovering over her again, his weight supported on his forearms. For better or worse, remember? I remember. She smiled up at him, heart full. Through crime wars and communication failures and stubborn masculine pride. That wasn't in our vows. It was implied. Her hands slid down his back. Dominic Russo, I'm sorry too, for not being direct about my feelings, for letting you overhear something out of context instead of just telling you I felt disconnected. We're both sorry, he murmured. We're both learning. We're both going to screw up again, probably. But as long as we keep talking, keep fighting for this." He gestured between them. "We'll be okay. We'll be better than okay." She pulled him down for a deeper kiss. "We'll be unstoppable." "Unstoppable," he repeated against her lips. "I like the sound of that." Outside, Chicago hummed with late-night energy. But inside their bedroom, wrapped in each other and renewed promises, Victoria and Dominic had found something precious they'd almost lost, and this time, they weren't letting go. So what can we learn from Victoria and Dominic's near disaster? First, let's talk about assumptions. Dominic heard half a conversation and filled in the blanks with his worst fears. He assumed Victoria wanted out of their marriage when she was actually fighting to stay in it. He assumed distance would protect her when it was actually destroying them both. He assumed he knew what she needed without ever asking her directly, and those assumptions nearly cost him everything. Here's the truth. Assumptions are relationship poison. They're the stories we tell ourselves when we're too afraid to ask for the real story. They're the narratives we construct in the silence, filling the gaps with our insecurities and fears instead of facts. If Dominic had done one thing differently, if he'd walked into that library 3 weeks earlier and asked Victoria what she meant, everything would have been different. 3 weeks of hell could have been avoided with one honest conversation. But he didn't ask. He assumed. And assumption led to isolation, which led to more assumptions, which created a vicious cycle that nearly destroyed their marriage. Second lesson, protection can become prison. Dominic thought he was being noble, thought he was keeping Victoria safe by shutting her out of the dangerous parts of his world, thought that ignorance would equal safety, that distance would equal protection. Instead, his protection became isolation, his walls became barriers, his silence became abandonment. The irony? Victoria was never safer in her ignorance. She was just lonelier, more vulnerable, more likely to make desperate plays like wearing that red dress to a reunion, hoping anyone would finally see her. Real protection in a marriage doesn't mean shielding your partner from reality. It means facing reality together. It means trusting them with the truth, even when the truth is ugly. It means believing they're strong enough to handle what you're carrying instead of deciding for them what they can bear. Third lesson, fight for your relationship, not just in it. Victoria could have given up. After 3 weeks of silence, after feeling invisible and unwanted, after watching her husband treat her like a stranger, she could have walked out that door and never looked back. But she didn't. Instead, she put on a red dress and created a crisis. She forced a confrontation. She made Dominic see her one last time before she accepted defeat. That dress wasn't about the reunion. It was about fighting for her marriage. It was a desperate, dangerous play to break through the walls between them. And it worked. Sometimes you have to create a crisis to break through the numbness. Sometimes you have to force the conversation that both of you have been avoiding. Sometimes you have to risk everything to save everything. Victoria's red dress was a symbol of that risk. A weapon, a final stand, a declaration that she wasn't going down without a fight. And that's what saved them. Fourth lesson, vulnerability is power. The turning point in their confrontation wasn't the anger or the accusations. It was the vulnerability. Dominic admitting he was terrified of losing her. Victoria confessing she felt invisible. Both of them finally dropping their defenses and showing each other the raw, wounded truth underneath. That's when everything changed. Because vulnerability breaks through walls that anger can't touch. Honesty creates connection that silence destroys. Admitting you're scared, you're hurt, you're drowning, that's not weakness. That's the courage that saves relationships. Dominic spent 3 weeks trying to be strong, trying to protect Victoria, trying to handle everything alone. And it nearly destroyed them. The moment he admitted he was terrified, the moment he let her see his fear, that's when they found their way back to each other. Final lesson. Communication isn't optional. Every relationship expert will tell you this. But Victoria and Dominic learned it the hard way. You cannot assume your partner knows what you're thinking, feeling, or needing. You have to say it, out loud, directly, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you're scared of the answer, even when it feels easier to just stay silent and hope things get better on their own. Silence doesn't heal, it festers. Distance doesn't protect, it destroys. Assumptions don't clarify, they distort. The only thing that saves a relationship in crisis is honest, vulnerable, sometimes painful communication. The kind where you say the hard things and ask the hard questions and risk hearing answers you don't want to hear. Because the alternative 3 weeks of hell, a marriage on the brink, a red dress as a last desperate play, is so much worse. Victoria and Dominic almost lost everything because they stopped talking. They saved everything because they finally started again. The reunion ended hours ago. Victoria never showed up, and honestly, it didn't matter. While her former classmates were reminiscing about college parties and comparing career trajectories, she was saving her marriage, fighting for the man she loved, breaking through walls that had nearly destroyed them both. That red dress never made it to the reunion. Instead, it ended up pooled on their bedroom floor, having served a far more important purpose than impressing old friends. If this story resonated with you, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next upload. As for the Bususan situation, 3 days after their reconciliation, Dominic walked into that meeting in the loop with Victoria's voice in his head and her support at his back. The negotiations were tense, brutal at times, but they reached an agreement. Territory divisions that both families could live with, a ceasefire that's held for months now. Dominic still believes Victoria's involvement made the difference, having her to strategize with, to bounce ideas off, to remind him what he was really fighting for. It changed everything. He wasn't operating from a place of fear anymore. He was operating from a place of partnership. Today, Victoria and Dominic Russo are stronger than they've ever been. Not because their marriage is perfect, it's not. They still argue, still have moments of miscommunication, still struggle with Dominic's instinct to protect and Victoria's need to be included. But now they talk about it. Now they face it together. Now they've learned that silence is more dangerous than any threat from the Bususan families or anyone else. The guest suite sits empty now, a reminder of 3 weeks they'll never get back. Sometimes Victoria walks past it and feels a chill, remembering what it felt like to lose him while he was still in the same house. And that red dress? It hangs in Victoria's closet, tucked between a black cocktail dress and a navy evening gown. She hasn't worn it since that night. Hasn't needed to, but she keeps it there as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes you have to risk everything to save everything. That sometimes the most powerful weapon you have is your willingness to fight for what matters. That sometimes a crisis is exactly what you need to break through to the truth. Dominic sees it sometimes when he's getting dressed in the morning, that flash of crimson silk, and every time he remembers the moment he almost lost her, the moment he realized his protection had become prison, the moment everything changed. He never wants to forget that feeling, that terror, that wake-up call, because it keeps him honest, keeps him communicating, keeps him treating Victoria like the partner she is instead of the fragile thing he feared she might be. Here's the final truth about Victoria and Dominic's story. 3 weeks of silence almost destroyed what 6 years of love had built. 3 weeks of assumptions and distance and walls nearly ended a marriage that had survived everything else. The dangers of Dominic's world, the pressures of his empire, the constant threats that came with being a Russo. The violence didn't break them. The danger didn't break them. The Mafia wars and territory disputes and late-night emergencies didn't break them. Silence almost did. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing in a marriage isn't the threats from outside. It's the silence within. It's the conversations you don't have. It's the assumptions you make instead of the questions you ask. It's the walls you build thinking you're protecting each other when you're actually just pushing each other away. Victoria and Dominic learned that lesson the hard way, but they learned it, and their marriage is stronger for it. So the next time you're tempted to stay silent, to assume, to protect your partner by shutting them out, remember the red dress. Remember 3 weeks of hell that could have been avoided with one honest conversation. And talk. Just talk. It might save everything.